Can you each share briefly how many abortions that you were involved with and the kinds of abortion procedures that you performed?
It's hard to know because I never counted, but I went through it with one of the residents who did the same clinic I did, and we figured out I probably did 500. I not only did first trimester abortions, but I went outside my program to learn how to do dismemberment abortions. I'm not sure, probably 10 of those, one of which was in the clinic where we only did first trimester abortions, and it turned out that the girl I was doing was supposed to be 12 weeks. Turned out she was 16 weeks.
What were the ages of the dismemberment abortions that you did, the ages of the children?
I think they might have gone up as high as 24 weeks, but I'm not really sure. I know they were good-sized babies, and as awful as it sounds, it was sort of like the technical challenge, and the bigger the better. It's hard to say that now, but that was the truth.
What was it like for you to do those abortions?
I was so focused on helping the woman. Even as I counted the body parts, I did not see them as human. I didn't see them as people. It was just the procedure, the woman on the table. That was my focus, helping her, and I somehow was able to totally black out that child. I tried so hard to make this really painful procedure less painful for my patient. I never even considered what that baby was feeling, and we now know that they feel pain, and I just can't imagine the excruciating pain that they suffered at my hand.
Between June of 1980 and February of 1985, in private practice, I performed just under 1,200 abortions. About 10% of them, or 124 of them, were second trimester D&E dismemberment abortions.
And the rest, were they first trimester abortions?
Yes.
Did either of you ever know anyone or get involved with yourself with saline abortions?
I did saline abortions during my training as a resident. If patients were late 70s, technology was different. If patients were 13 weeks from last menstrual period or less, we did the suction DNCs in the delivery room of all places. And if they were more than 13 weeks, we'd make them wait till they're about 16 or 17 weeks and then bring them back for saline abortion procedures.
What was it like when you were doing saline abortions? Can you describe what the experience was and what happened during those abortions?
Saline abortion is horrendous. It's one of these procedures we don't do anymore. The procedure is to do an amniocentesis, put a needle into the uterus, into the amniotic sac, draw as much of the amniotic fluid out as possible, and then substitute 20% salt solution. These women had to go through labor. The salt solution would burn the babies, and when they died, it would release prostaglandins and initiated labor. So these women had to go through labor. It was I saw them run anywhere between 8 and 36 hours between the time we did the saline injections and the babies were delivered. I never had a live birth with that procedure, although it was possible. It's just a horrific procedure, especially for patients, going through the abortion at all and then being through in labor that long. And that was why when D&E abortions were developed in the early 80s, my partner and I jumped on the bandwagon because we saw it as a far better procedure than the saline.
What did the babies look like after a saline abortion, and what were usually the ages of the babies?
They were 16 weeks and up, typically up to around, as I recall, maybe 21 or 22 weeks. We could do them later, but that in my hospital needed special approval, so we didn't get very many of those. The babies were intact, they were dead, but you could see where the skin was macerated or burned from the chemicals.
Claire and Melissa, you both have survived abortion attempts. Can you start, Melissa, first by sharing your story about the abortion attempt that you survived?
Yeah, as we're talking about saline abortions, that's who I am. So my medical records reflected my birth mother was between 18 and 20 weeks pregnant when a saline infusion abortion was forced upon her against her will, bypassing hospital regulations at that time. But through my medical records, we now know that she was probably more like 31 weeks when that abortion was performed. I soaked in that toxic salt solution. My birth mother experienced that over a 5-day period. And the belief, of course, was that it would successfully end my life. But the fear then became that she was going to lose hers in it because it was taking so long. So on the 5th day of the abortion procedure, I was finally expelled from the womb, delivered at St. Luke's Hospital in Sioux City, Iowa, not because they were intending for me to be born alive and they would provide me medical care, but simply because that's where that late-term abortion was being performed. And the day that I now celebrate as my birthday is the day that I was accidentally born alive. And I think that's one of those things that people in our world take for granted, that it is a privilege for people to have a birthday. It shouldn't be. But what's the difference between the three of you and Claire and I? Why is it the day that we were accidentally born?
Claire, what kind of abortion procedure did you survive?
My birth mother was taken to have an abortion at 20 weeks, and she had a dismemberment, D&E abortion, and she was told that it was successful, that she could go home and go back to her normal life, but she went home and realized that things weren't right, and she was home for about 4 weeks, went back to the doctor, and they told her that she had been leaking amniotic fluid and that her abortion had been successful on one baby, but that I had survived her D&E abortion. And I was born just a few weeks later. I was born 10 weeks premature. I weighed 3 pounds. I had a dislocated hip and I had club feet. And she had a dry birth, and so she was told that those complications were due to that and due to the abortion.
Claire, what is it like hearing Dr. Altman and Dr. Levatino, both of them having been involved with D&E abortions? What is that like hearing about that?
It's hard. I mean, it's hard for me to hear that the humanity of my twin was not recognized as you pieced babies' bodies back together. Because I know, like you said, at 20 weeks, that my twin must have felt something. And I mean, it makes me wonder. I've always wanted to ask a former abortionist, like, what would my birth mother have experienced during her abortion that successfully aborted my twin? Because she said it was incredibly painful and incredibly hard.
A lot of pain. It's, you know, there's no anesthesia to the, unless you're under general, there's no real anesthesia to the body of the uterus, just the cervix. And you're going in and out and pushing and pulling, and they're cramping, and you know, it's very painful.
Yeah, a little different in my experience. We would do suction DNCs up to 10 weeks in the office, but beyond that, we would be in a hospital. That was at the time. I know that's not the way it's usually done now. I think it's insane not having a patient be in a proper environment because complications can occur with D&E abortions. My patients were anesthetized doing D&E abortions, and they would not have gone through that. On the other hand, I always tell my medical students a story about doing a D&E, and this is why I know these are done in freestanding clinics, and I personally can't picture it. I had the experience of doing an 18-week D&E, and you know, you're using the instruments to pull out arms and legs, but instead of arms and legs, I got the lady's intestines in my clamp. The uterus had been perforated, the intestine got grabbed and pulled all the way through the uterus to the outside. But I've got my patient, and this is why we did it in a hospital as a safety measure. This patient is in a sterile environment, anesthetized, get a surgeon, fix the bowel, complete the abortion, and she did okay. So I can't even picture doing it outside of a hospital environment personally.
We were in an office and doing those. I never had any of those complications. But when I was on call later, after stopping abortions, we had a woman come into the emergency room with her bowel hanging from her vagina. Sure. She immediately went to the surgeons. I never knew what happened to her, but they were concerned that she wouldn't live.
Did either of you ever have an incomplete abortion, to your knowledge?
Yes. Certainly in my training I did. I'm trying to think of all the abortions I did once I was an attending. I have to imagine I had a handful, but not very many if I did, because I was getting very good at it at that point. But definitely, certainly in my training I did.
What happened in that training experience with the incomplete abortion?
In the particular one I'm thinking of, I had done a suction DNC on a patient, and everything seemed to be fine. And a day or two later, I got a call from the chairman of the department telling me that this woman was sitting home watching TV when she literally dropped out of her baby's arm on the couch or something, and obviously had a pretty severe reaction to that. And we brought her in and completed the abortion.
Melissa, you endured a saline abortion. Dr. Levatino, early on in his practice, was involved with saline abortions. Do you have any questions for Dr. Levatino?
One of the commentaries I hear often from survivors and women that we serve at the Abortion Survivors Network is that they aren't provided a proper exam. And I know in my birth mother's experience, that's what she experienced as well. The abortionist did not provide an adequate exam to know how far along she truly was. So I'm curious, Dr. Levatino, what your feedback to my abortionist would be.
I'm listening to your abortion story about your mom was projected to be, what, 18 or 19 weeks pregnant, and she was actually 31. What kind of, and this is a medical term that is not complimentary, what kind of barber doesn't know the difference between a 19-week and a 31-week pregnancy? I can't even imagine that. And again, I teach medical students, and I try to impress on them several things. First, they are not agents of the state. The other thing, too, is that it is incredibly important to understand exactly what the gestational age of your patient is before you start an abortion procedure. And again, we weren't running a freestanding abortion clinic. This was my office. And it's different in that case. If you want to have your baby, that's great. If you want to have an abortion, that's fine. We knew that it was so important never to be caught in a situation where you had a gestational age that you didn't know for sure. We did ultrasounds on every single one of our abortion patients, and we had an ultrasound machine in the office. We did not charge them for those ultrasounds. That was part of our evaluation, make sure we never got in that situation. And it troubles me now when I hear about, this is a little more far afield, but I've got to say it. I mean, I hear now about medical abortion or chemical abortion being done with internet websites where your contact with the patient is limited to either a video chat or text. How in the name of anyone can you determine gestational age by just talking to somebody? She'll give you her last menstrual period if she knows it. But you cannot adequately determine gestational age on video chat. You cannot tell if a patient may be carrying an ectopic pregnancy on a video chat. This is dangerous, and this is being promoted.